What would you do if someone close to you vanished, leaving behind only cryptic clues, unanswered calls, and a sense that something isn't right? Now imagine, days later, that person is found dead in one of the most puzzling crime scenes imaginable, a body in a locked room, a fall that seems impossible, and a note full of strange codes and names. This isn't a movie plot. This is the real, unsolved mystery of Rey Rivera. Rey Rivera's story is as unsettling as it is perplexing. In May of 2006, Rey, a seemingly happy man with a promising career and loving marriage, disappeared without a trace. The search led his loved ones to the Belvedere Hotel in Baltimore, where his body was discovered days later in a conference room, having allegedly fallen from the roof in a way that defies logic. But this story isn't just about his death. It's about the many questions left unanswered, the strange details that don't add up, and the creeping suspicion that there's more to the story than meets the eye. Before we dive into the bizarre events surrounding Rey Rivera's disappearance, let's take a moment to understand who he was. Rey wasn't just another face in the crowd, he was charismatic, driven, and full of ambitions. Originally from Southern California, Rey was a writer at heart with dreams of filmmaking. In fact, storytelling was his passion, and he spent much of his life developing scripts and exploring creative projects. In 2004, Rey and his wife Allison moved to Baltimore. They did so because Rey had landed a job working for his close friend Porter Stansberry at Stansberry and Associates, a financial publishing firm. Though finance wasn't Ray's dream, the opportunity was lucrative, and his friendship with Porter made the offer even more appealing. It was meant to be a temporary stop on his journey toward bigger things, but Baltimore would be where Ray's life took a dark and mysterious turn. Despite his success in finance, Ray never let go of his filmmaking dreams. He was always writing, always thinking about new projects. His love for storytelling was infectious, and those close to him knew Ray was destined for more. But something shifted in his last days, something that seemed to pull him away from the life he had worked so hard to build. What was it? Was Ray hiding something? Or was there someone or something that led to his untimely and tragic end? May 16th, 2006 started as an ordinary day for Rey Rivera, but it would soon spiral into one of the most chilling mysteries Baltimore has ever seen. That afternoon, Ray received a phone call, one that seemed urgent enough to make him dash out of his home in a rush, leaving behind his belongings and his wife, who was out of town on business. The details of what happened next are murky. Witnesses reported seeing Ray driving quickly through the city, his car later found abandoned near the Belvedere Hotel. And then silence. No one heard from him again. His phone went unanswered. His family and friends launched a desperate search, blanketing the city with flyers, pleading for any information that might lead to Ray's whereabouts. For a week, his disappearance confounded everyone who knew him. Ray wasn't the type to vanish without a word. He was responsible, grounded, and had no history of mental illness or trouble. The mystery deepened as days passed, and with each hour, the hope of finding him alive grew dimmer. Then, on May 24th, searchers made a horrifying discovery: Ray's body lying under a hole in the roof of a room at the Belvedere Hotel. The fall should have been clear cut, yet everything about the scene was wrong. How had he ended up in such a hidden part of the hotel, and why did it seem like his body had fallen in a way that didn't make sense? The answers to these questions remain elusive, leaving Rey Rivera's story one of the most baffling unsolved mysteries in recent history. 8 days after Rey Rivera's sudden disappearance, searchers stumbled upon a scene that would only deepen the mystery. On May 24th, 2006, a group of investigators and friends of the family, following an unmistakable odor, were led to a meeting room in an isolated part of the Belvedere Hotel, an area that had not been immediately searched despite its proximity to where his car had been found. It was there, beneath a gaping hole in the roof, that Ray's lifeless body was discovered. The location of this room was not one frequently used by hotel staff, which explained why it had taken so long to notice the smell that would eventually lead to his body. The positioning of his body added layers of confusion. He was found partially decomposed, lying below the hole in a way that suggested a fall from a significant height. But something didn't sit right. How had he ended up in this obscure location? Why had no one heard anything in the days following his disappearance? And most importantly, why wasn't this area searched sooner, despite his abandoned car being found nearby? The Belvedere, a historic building, had its share of forgotten spaces. This particular room had no direct access from the main hotel floors, making it unlikely for anyone to wander into it by accident. Yet here was Rey Rivera, a man who had no known connection to the Belvedere, lying dead in a space that seemed all but forgotten. But it wasn't just where his body was found that puzzled investigators, it was how he got there. The official theory presented to the public was that Ray had leaped or perhaps fallen from the rooftop of the Belvedere, crashing through the roof of the meeting room below. But when you look closely at the details of this so called fall, it raises far more questions than it answers. For starters, the gap in the roof was small, too small. Many experts would argue for a body to naturally break through at the speed and angle needed for such a fall. The hole was narrow, its edges jagged, and Ray's body had landed directly below it. However, for him to have fallen through from the roof, he would have needed to clear a significant distance, nearly 40 feet horizontally. The physics didn't quite add up. This wasn't a clean, vertical drop. It was as if Ray had been launched from the roof. Then there was the roof itself. The Belvedere is an aging building, and the area from which Ray would have supposedly jumped was crowded with equipment and obstacles. There were no clear signs of how he could have made his way there, let alone gained enough momentum to clear such a distance. No security cameras captured his movements, and the rooftop access was restricted, making his presence there an even greater enigma. But the questions didn't end with the fall. The condition of Ray's body only added more layers of complexity. From the moment Rey Rivera's body was discovered, it was clear that the circumstances surrounding his death were anything but straightforward. For one, the injuries on his body didn't quite match what you'd expect from a fall of that height. Yes, he had sustained severe trauma, broken ribs, punctured lungs, and shattered bones, but certain details didn't align with the kind of damage typically seen in a high velocity impact. For example, his legs showed minimal damage, something unusual for someone who supposedly landed feet first from such a height. His injuries seemed more scattered, inconsistent with the trajectory needed to have fallen through that hole. It was almost as if his body had been staged, or worse, that something had happened to him before the fall. The location of the hole itself was strange. Its dimensions didn't quite match the size of his body, leaving experts puzzled over how Ray had created such a gap. Was it possible he had been thrown, or had something else entirely taken place before his body ended up at the Belvedere? Adding to the mystery was the sheer distance between the edge of the roof and the hole, a gap too wide for most to believe a human could leap across, even with a running start. And yet, here Ray was, below a hole that by all accounts he couldn't have easily reached. The hotel's layout, the access to the roof, the lack of witnesses, all of it made the notion of suicide or accidental fall seem less likely. With so many inconsistencies, the crime scene raised a crucial question. Was Rey Rivera's death really the result of a tragic fall, or was something much darker at play? When Rey Rivera's body was examined, the autopsy report left as many questions as answers. The cause of death was listed as blunt force trauma consistent with a fall, but when you look closer at the details, the picture becomes far more complicated. Ray's injuries were widespread. His skull was fractured, his ribs broken, his lungs punctured, and his legs shattered. On the surface, this seemed consistent with someone falling from a great height, but it wasn't the injuries themselves that raised suspicion. It was the pattern and nature of them. For instance, as mentioned earlier, the damage to his legs was inconsistent with someone who would have hit the ground feet first. In a fall like this, the brunt of the impact should have been on his legs and pelvis, but the injuries there were less severe compared to his upper body. His ribs were fractured in a way that seemed odd, and while his skull had significant trauma, some experts argue that the pattern didn't match what you'd expect from falling through a roof. Even more perplexing was the lack of other injuries typically associated with a fall from such a height. There was no significant damage to his hands or arms, no defensive wounds, no clear indication that he had tried to break his fall, as most people instinctively do. The condition of his shoes also raised eyebrows. They were barely scuffed, which seemed nearly impossible for someone who would have traveled such a distance before crashing through a roof. Could it be that Ray's body sustained some of these injuries before the fall, or was there something else happening that hasn't been fully uncovered? The autopsy report did little to clarify these questions, leaving investigators and his family with even more doubts about what really happened on the day Rey Rivera died. If the autopsy raised questions about the physical nature of Ray's death, the discovery of a strange note at his home brought a completely different layer of mystery to the case. Taped behind Ray's computer was a bizarre, rambling document that seemed to defy explanation. The note was filled with references to movies, famous personalities, and cryptic mentions of Freemasonry. At first glance, it seemed disjointed, almost nonsensical. Yet, for those who knew Ray, it was out of character for him to leave behind something so chaotic without meaning. The note named well-known figures, both historical and modern, seemingly drawing connections between them in a way that made little sense on the surface. There were quotes from movies, including The Matrix, and references to various projects Ray had worked on or admired. But the most intriguing part was the inclusion of Freemasonry, a secretive organization that has long been the subject of conspiracy theories. What was Ray trying to communicate? Some have suggested that the note was his way of revealing something hidden, while others think it may have been the product of a troubled mind in his final days. His family has insisted that Ray wasn't suffering from any mental health issues, which only deepens the mystery. The note wasn't dated, and there were no clear instructions left behind. But one thing was certain: it was meant to be found. The fact that it was taped behind his computer in a place where someone would inevitably discover it suggests that Ray wanted someone to read it after he was gone. Whether it was a final message, a cry for help, or something entirely different remains one of the most puzzling aspects of this case. The mention of Freemasonry in Rey Rivera's note has led to a wide range of theories, many of which involve secret societies, hidden codes, and potential conspiracies. Freemasonry, an ancient and often misunderstood organization, has long been associated with symbols, rituals, and secrecy. It's no surprise that its inclusion in Ray's note has sparked speculation about its meaning. Some believe that Ray may have been trying to expose something about Freemasonry. The note's structure, filled with what seemed like random connections, led some to wonder if it contained hidden codes or messages that only those in the know could decipher. Was Ray attempting to leave a trail for someone to follow, or was he referencing something larger that had caused him distress? Others think that the mention of Freemasonry might have been symbolic, a reference to secrecy, power, or hidden knowledge. Given Ray's fascination with storytelling and the fact that he was a writer, some have speculated that he may have been weaving elements of fiction with reality, using Freemasonry as a metaphor for the forces at play in his life. It's also possible that Ray's note was influenced by external sources. He was an avid reader and movie lover, and some have suggested that the Freemasonry references were part of a larger narrative he was crafting, whether for personal reasons or as part of a story he was working on. Yet, without more context, it's impossible to know for sure. The Freemasonry connection has also fed into larger conspiracy theories about Ray's death. Was he involved in something secret that led to his demise? Was he trying to reveal something about the financial world he worked in, or was his death orchestrated by forces he hinted at in his note? These questions, like so many in Rey Rivera's case, remain unanswered, leaving room for endless speculation. One of the most complex threads in Ray Rivera's life was his relationship with Porter Stansbury, the founder of the financial firm Stansbury and Associates. The two had been close friends for years, long before Ray had relocated to Baltimore to work for Stansbury's company. On the surface, their friendship seemed genuine. Porter was even the one who convinced Ray to move to Baltimore and work for his financial publishing firm, promising stability and success in an industry that wasn't necessarily Ray's passion but offered financial security. Stansbury and Associates, the company Ray worked for, was known for producing financial newsletters offering investment advice to subscribers. It was a business that dealt with large sums of money and significant influence. However, it also had its share of controversy. Prior to Ray's death, the company had been fined millions by the Securities and Exchange Commission (SEC) for fraudulent investment advice. This legal battle had put the firm under a cloud of suspicion and, according to some, made it a target for deeper scrutiny. What really fueled suspicion, though, was how the company reacted after Ray's body was found. Despite their long standing friendship, Porter Stansbury and his company immediately imposed a gag order on all employees, forbidding them from speaking to law enforcement or the media about Ray's death. This strange move led many to wonder, what were they hiding? Was there something within the company that Ray had uncovered, something that made Stansbury want to keep everyone quiet? Porter himself has remained largely silent about the case, only issuing brief statements of sorrow for his friend's death. His lack of cooperation with the investigation added a layer of mystery, making people question whether their friendship had been as straightforward as it appeared. Was Ray's work at Stansbury and Associates somehow connected to his untimely death, and was Porter trying to protect the company from a deeper scandal? As investigators and amateur sleuths dove deeper into the circumstances surrounding Ray Rivera's death, one theory emerged with startling potential. Could Ray's death have been tied to financial crimes? His position at Stansbury and Associates wasn't just a job, it was a doorway into a world of high-stakes financial decisions, insider knowledge, and a network of powerful individuals. Stansbury and Associates had already been under the microscope for its SEC troubles. The company had been fined millions for promoting false stock information, and some speculated that Ray may have been privy to more than he should have been. Had Ray discovered something illegal or unethical happening at the firm? Was he about to blow the whistle on a scandal that could have brought down the company or even cost investors millions? Given the timing of his death and the company's legal woes, the theory that Ray had insider knowledge that made him a target gained traction. He had worked closely with Porter Stansbury, and it wasn't far-fetched to think that someone in his position might stumble upon sensitive information that could get him into trouble. Financial crimes, especially those involving millions of dollars, often come with high stakes, and whistleblowers don't always fare well. Had Ray uncovered something that he wasn't supposed to see, something big enough to lead to his death? Theories circulated that he may have been silenced, whether by people within the company or external forces who wanted to keep him quiet. The strange behavior of the firm after his death, the gag order, and Porter's unwillingness to cooperate with law enforcement only fueled these suspicions. As if financial motives weren't enough, another possibility emerged, one that seemed to tie together the cryptic note found in Ray's home, his work at the financial firm, and his sudden, unexplained death. Was Ray Rivera investigating something on his own, something dangerous enough to get him killed? The note that Ray left behind, filled with references to famous figures, secret societies, and cryptic symbols, hinted at something more than just a man in crisis. Some began to wonder if Ray had uncovered something larger than his work at Stansbury and Associates, something perhaps related to the financial world but connected to deeper, more shadowy figures. Could the note have been a coded message revealing what Ray had been working on or what he had discovered? Ray had always been an inquisitive, intelligent person with a love for stories and mysteries. It's possible that his natural curiosity led him down a dangerous path. The inclusion of Freemasonry and secret societies in his note, combined with his access to insider financial information, made it plausible that Ray was digging into something far beyond what anyone expected. Was he following a trail of corruption, linking powerful individuals together through finance, secret organizations, and influence? Or had he stumbled upon something by accident, something that he couldn't unsee? The theory that Ray was investigating something dangerous, whether financial crimes, secret societies, or both, adds an entirely new dimension to the case. If this theory holds any weight, it would explain why his death seemed staged, why there were so many inconsistencies in the crime scene, and why the gag order was swiftly put in place. Whatever Ray was investigating may have cost him his life. One of the most glaring oddities in the case of Rey Rivera is the complete absence of security camera footage showing his entry into the Belvedere Hotel. For a hotel as prominent as the Belvedere, one would expect security cameras to be placed in key areas such as entrances, hallways, and rooftop access. However, not a single frame of footage exists showing Ray entering the building or moving through it, let alone making his way to the rooftop where his fatal fall supposedly occurred. The lack of footage has fueled rampant speculation about whether someone tampered with the tapes or if the cameras were somehow disabled at key moments. How could a man vanish into a hotel without leaving a single trace on security cameras? The cameras inside and around the Belvedere should have captured his movements, but it's as if Ray never even entered the building. This mysterious absence of video evidence raises serious doubts about the official narrative of his death. Some have suggested that foul play could have been involved, with someone either manipulating the footage or ensuring that Ray's presence remained unrecorded. Others question whether he even entered the hotel on his own accord. Could he have been led there by someone else through an entrance that wasn't monitored by cameras? The missing footage doesn't just complicate the case, it makes it seem as though someone didn't want Ray to be seen. The fact that no cameras captured his final moments only deepens the mystery, leaving more questions than answers. Was this a simple oversight, or does the missing footage point to a more orchestrated cover up? This absence of crucial evidence continues to haunt investigators, leaving a gaping hole in the timeline of Rey Rivera's final hours. Despite the bizarre circumstances surrounding Rey Rivera's death, the media coverage at the time was shockingly minimal. His story didn't seem to gain the widespread attention that many other mysterious deaths or disappearances often do. This lack of attention raises the question why. Why did Ray's case slip under the radar when the elements of his death seemed like they were plucked straight from a true crime thriller? Part of the reason may have been the initial ruling by the police that his death was likely a suicide, despite the numerous inconsistencies in the evidence. Once authorities lean towards suicide, many cases lose the media's attention. But for those who did dig deeper into Ray's death, the oddities were impossible to ignore. Even then, the case remained largely a local story without the nationwide attention it deserved. It wasn't until 2020, when Unsolved Mysteries rebooted on Netflix, that Rey Rivera's story resurfaced in the public consciousness. The episode dedicated to his case brought a wave of new interest and speculation. Suddenly, his story was everywhere. Discussion forums lit up with theories. Amateur sleuths took a renewed interest, and the public began questioning everything about the case, from the missing security footage to the cryptic note. The resurgence in interest also brought new pressure on law enforcement to reopen or re examine the case. For many, the episode was a turning point, sparking fresh hope that answers could still be found. But even with the renewed attention, Ray's death remains unsolved, and the more people learned about it, the more complicated the mystery became. The public's reaction, from frustration to fascination, only highlights how strange and unsettling the case truly is. Throughout this ordeal, no one has been more vocal about the mysteries surrounding Rey Rivera's death than his wife, Allison. From the beginning, Allison rejected the notion that Rey had committed suicide. She knew her husband better than anyone, and nothing about his disappearance or death made sense to her. Allison's belief that foul play was involved has been unwavering, and she has spent years demanding answers that, to this day, remain elusive. Allison has been clear in her frustration with the investigation. She's pointed out the lack of cooperation from Stansbury and Associates, the oddities surrounding the crime scene, and the inconsistencies in the autopsy report. More than once, she's publicly expressed her disappointment with how law enforcement handled the case, especially when they leaned towards suicide as the likely cause of death without, in her opinion, thoroughly exploring other possibilities. Ray's family also expressed confusion and disbelief at his death. His brother, Angel, shared that Ray had been under stress leading up to his disappearance but wasn't showing any signs that suggested he was suicidal. The family felt that key elements of the case were either being ignored or swept under the rug, and they've consistently pushed for a more thorough investigation. For Allison, losing Ray was more than a tragic accident. It was the beginning of a lifelong quest for the truth. Her public statements often come with a palpable sense of pain and determination. She has never wavered in her belief that her husband's death was no accident, and that someone somewhere knows more than they're letting on. This personal side of the story, the grief, frustration, and desire for justice, reminds us that beyond the mystery lies a family desperate for answers and closure. The Baltimore Police Department's investigation into Ray Rivera's death started with an uphill battle. From the very beginning, the case presented challenges that made it difficult for law enforcement to draw clear conclusions. When Ray's body was found in the Belvedere Hotel's conference room, the police were confronted with a confusing scene: a gaping hole in the roof, an abandoned car nearby, and a body that had been decomposing for several days. Despite these oddities, the initial stages of the investigation leaned heavily toward the possibility of suicide. Law enforcement often faces pressure to determine the cause of death quickly, and in the absence of immediate signs of foul play, the strange fall from the roof seemed, at first glance, like a tragic but self inflicted accident. But as the investigation progressed, more inconsistencies came to light. For one, the physics of the fall didn't seem to add up. How could Ray have jumped such a long distance from the roof to the point where he crashed through the ceiling? There were no clear answers to these questions, yet the police continued to pursue the suicide angle. Then there was the discovery of the cryptic note found behind Ray's computer. This added a layer of complexity to the case, but police didn't view it as a clear indicator of foul play. They treated it as possible evidence of Ray's state of mind, suggesting that he may have been in a confused or distressed mental state. The absence of any direct threats or external factors in the note allowed them to continue leaning towards suicide as the most probable explanation. Another challenge the police faced was the lack of cooperation from Stansbury and Associates, where Ray had worked. The gag order imposed by the firm meant that investigators had limited access to people who might have known Ray's state of mind or could provide insight into his final days. This, combined with the hotel's missing security footage, left the police with fewer leads to pursue. Despite the unusual circumstances, the case was officially ruled as undetermined, though many believed the investigations leaning towards suicide was an attempt to close the case quickly. The lack of hard evidence pointing to foul play, coupled with the complexities of the crime scene, made it difficult for police to definitively declare the death a homicide. The investigation ultimately left Ray's family and friends feeling unsatisfied. Many of them believed that the police had overlooked crucial elements, such as the physics of the fall and the oddities surrounding the crime scene. This dissatisfaction only added to the ongoing public debate over what really happened to Rey Rivera. Was Rey Rivera's death truly the result of suicide, or is there something far more sinister behind the circumstances of his demise? The debate has raged on since the day his body was found, with compelling arguments on both sides, making this case one of the most perplexing unsolved mysteries of recent years. For those who believe Ray's death was a suicide, the strongest arguments lie in his personal struggles leading up to the event. He was reportedly under significant stress at the time, both professionally and personally. The cryptic note found behind his computer suggests that his mind was in a chaotic state. Its disorganized references to Freemasonry, movies, and famous figures led some to speculate that Ray may have been battling internal demons or possibly even a mental health crisis. The police leaned heavily on this theory, pointing to the fact that people under extreme stress sometimes make erratic, unexpected decisions. But those who argue that foul play was involved focus on the many inconsistencies that make suicide seem improbable. The physics of the fall itself remains one of the most glaring issues. Experts have pointed out that it would have been nearly impossible for Ray to leap the distance required to land where he did. The gap between the roof's edge and the hole in the ceiling was too wide to be explained by a simple jump. This fact alone suggests that something more than a voluntary leap may have occurred. Perhaps Ray was thrown or pushed from the roof, or perhaps his body was staged in the room after the fact. Then there's the note. While some believe it indicates a troubled mind, others see it as a potential clue. The note's references to secret societies and cryptic symbols have led to countless conspiracy theories. Was Ray trying to communicate something important before his death? Could the note be linked to something he uncovered at Stansberry and Associates, or even something bigger? The lack of clear answers only adds to the intrigue, but it also raises suspicion about whether someone else may have been involved in his death. Finally, there's the behavior of the people around Ray in the days leading up to his death, particularly Porter Stansberry and his company. The gag order imposed on Stansberry and Associates employees, preventing them from speaking to the police, raised red flags for many. What were they hiding? Could Ray have discovered something illegal or dangerous in his work, and was he silenced because of it? In the end, the case remains open to interpretation. Those who believe in the suicide theory point to Ray's personal struggles and the confusing note as evidence. But for many, the inconsistencies in the fall, the missing footage, and the strange actions of those around him suggest foul play. And until more concrete evidence emerges, the debate will continue to fuel theories, leaving the true cause of Ray Rivera's death an unsolved mystery. The mysterious death of Rey Rivera has given rise to a web of conspiracy theories, many of which delve into the idea that powerful forces or secret organizations might have played a role in his demise. From the cryptic note found taped behind his computer to the bizarre circumstances of his death, the case has all the hallmarks of something larger and more sinister than a tragic accident or suicide. One of the most prominent theories involves Freemasonry. As soon as the cryptic note was revealed to the public, filled with strange references to Freemasonry and secret codes, conspiracy theorists jumped at the chance to link Ray's death to this ancient organization. The note referenced famous Freemasons, secret societies, and a series of odd phrases, leading many to wonder whether Ray had uncovered something about Freemasonry that he wasn't supposed to know. Freemasons, often the subject of conspiracy theories for their alleged influence in global politics and finance, became a central figure in the speculation surrounding his death. Others believe that secret societies beyond Freemasonry may have been involved. The inclusion of coded messages and cryptic references in Ray's note hinted at a larger, more nefarious network of individuals working behind the scenes. Could Ray have stumbled onto something dangerous in his financial work at Stansberry and Associates, something that linked powerful people or secret organizations together? The idea that he may have been silenced for uncovering hidden truths is one of the most widely circulated theories. There's also the theory that Ray was lured to his death. His final day was marked by a strange, urgent phone call that caused him to leave his house in a hurry. Some believe that this phone call was not from a friend or colleague, but from someone who wanted Ray to come to a specific location where they could carry out their plan. The fact that no security footage exists of Ray entering the Belvedere Hotel raises the question of whether he ever entered the building by his own will. Was he taken there by force, or was he coerced into going there under false pretenses? These theories, though based on circumstantial evidence and speculation, have kept the mystery of Rey Rivera's death alive for over a decade. Each new piece of information that comes to light only deepens the intrigue, but none of it has been enough to conclusively solve the puzzle. The conspiracy theories continue to swirl, drawing in amateur investigators and theorists who believe that the truth is out there hidden in the codes and symbols Ray may have been trying to communicate before his death. The case of Rey Rivera gained a resurgence in 2020 when it was featured in an episode of Netflix's Unsolved Mysteries reboot. Before that, the case had largely flown under the radar, overshadowed by more high-profile disappearances and unsolved deaths. But the Unsolved Mysteries episode changed all of that, bringing a fresh wave of attention to Rey's mysterious death and sparking public speculation on an unprecedented scale. The episode did more than just recap the known facts of the case, it reignited interest in the strange details like the missing security footage, the cryptic note, and the odd trajectory of Ray's fall. Viewers who had never heard of the case before were suddenly captivated by the bizarre nature of the story, and discussion forums and social media exploded with new theories. Many amateur sleuths began dissecting every element of the case, searching for clues that had been overlooked in the original investigation. One of the biggest impacts of the Unsolved Mysteries episode was the way it opened up new leads. In fact, after the episode aired, the show's producers reported receiving multiple tips from viewers who believed they had information relevant to the case. Though no groundbreaking discoveries have come from these tips so far, they've helped keep the investigation alive. Additionally, the renewed interest has put pressure on law enforcement to take a fresh look at the evidence, although no significant updates from authorities have been made public. Beyond the case itself, the episode also revived conversations about mental health, conspiracy theories, and the impact of stress in high stakes careers like finance. Public interest hasn't waned since the episode aired, with viewers continuing to dissect the case, rewatch the episode, and debate what really happened to Rey Rivera. As we wrap up the story of Rey Rivera, we're left with more questions than answers. How does a man vanish in broad daylight only to be found dead in one of the strangest crime scenes imaginable? Why was there no security footage? How did he end up falling through a narrow hole in the roof? And what did the cryptic note really mean? These questions and so many more remain at the heart of this mystery. Ray's case presents a troubling combination of unexplained events, strange coincidences, and unanswered questions. Was his death a suicide, the tragic result of stress and a mind unraveling? Or was there something more sinister at play, something tied to secret organizations, financial crimes, or the knowledge he might have uncovered in his work? The truth remains elusive, leaving us to ponder the possible answers. But perhaps the most pressing question of all is this. Why, after so many years, does this case remain unsolved? What evidence was overlooked, and what secrets still lurk in the shadows, waiting to be discovered? Ray's family, particularly his wife Allison, continues to seek justice and closure, believing that the true story of what happened to Ray has yet to come to light. Now, I leave it to you, the listener. What do you think happened to Ray Rivera? Was it a simple suicide, or does the truth lie buried in the layers of conspiracy and secrecy that have surrounded this case from the very beginning? Share your thoughts, your theories, and your questions, because until the day we find the answers, this mystery will continue to haunt us.